I'm Greg Garvis of Four Season Tools. What we're going to do is talk about how to build a W-truss for a 30-foot wide high tunnel. What we did is we made our first one, we made a template, and then we were able to repeat that process over and over again. So we pounded a stake in the ground right here. We pounded another one over there on the far end. It's a 30-foot wide tunnel, so we want to try to pre-tension the hoops by 1 inch. So from the inside of this stake all the way to the inside of the other stake will be 29 feet, 11 inches. These bows, the way they're made, we're actually coming in a little bit, so we put a second stake in the ground just to make sure that we were maintaining our width as we were building the hoops. This piece up here with the bend in it, and then the casual arc is called the roof hoop. At the peak, this small piece right here is the ridge hoop, and then we have another roof hoop over here. So 2 roof hoops and a ridge hoop make the whole hoop top. This is all the hoop pieces are 2 3/8 inch, and all the braces, trusses, and collar ties we put in are 1 3/4 inch. When we put these pieces together, we put the swage ends into themselves. So before we put these 2 pieces together, we slide the brace bands on. It's easier to put the 2 3/8 inch brace bands onto the hoops before you put the pieces together. So since this is a W-truss, we put in 3 brace bands on each side. One comes up here for this piece, which we call the long truss. Another one comes down here into the roof hoop for the short truss. And then the last one over here is for the collar tie. The collar tie is the piece that went in first. The collar tie is made up of 2 12-foot brace pipes with a 3-inch swage on the end. So it's flattened on this end. So what we did is we put this piece together with the center collar tie piece. In this case it's 21 3/4 inches. And then the other one. So we have a 12-foot, 21 3/4 inch piece, and another 12-foot piece. Before we assemble these 3 pieces of the collar tie, we put the 1 3/8 inch brace bands on first as well. So we have a 1 3/8 inch brace band for the short and long truss over here, and a 1 3/8 inch brace band for the short and the long truss over here. Both of the truss bottoms share the same brace band. So we put it together, we put the collar tie pieces together, we use self-tapping screws to put the seams together for the collar ties, and since the collar ties can be rotated, we make sure that when we build them, both of the ends are in the same plane. So put the 2 brace bands on, screw those together, 1 self-tapping screw in each seam, and that puts the collar tie in place. After the collar tie is in place and we loosely fit it to the brace bands on the far side, what we want to do is make sure that that's parallel to the ground. So we run a string from the stake at the bottom of the hoop all the way to a stake at the other bottom of the hoop, and that's this string right here. Once we dry fit that collar tie, we measure up from that string on both ends. We make sure that that measurement is the same on both sides, and that'll ensure that the collar tie ends up parallel to the ground. So when we're building the hoops, it's important to make sure that the bottoms of the hoops are always right where you have your stakes to make sure that you're lined up with the bottom of the ground. Now that you've got your collar tie installed and it's parallel to this string, we do run this string right here to make sure that we know where our parallel to the ground is. We then come back and we tighten this in place. Now that our collar tie is installed, we can dry fit our trusses. For these, we just tried to make sure that the angle of the truss right here in between the collar tie and the short truss is about the same as the angle in between the long truss and the collar tie. Also, when the trusses are put in, we always try to build them consistently. In this case, we try to make sure that all the long trusses were on top of the short trusses where they share this brace band. The measurement that we take right here, we put the tape measure on the end of this bolt. Come down here. Right, and this 98 inches is right to the leading edge of that brace band. We want to make sure that we measure this the same and that the same from the other side to make sure that the brace bands are always consistently put in the same places. Once your collar tie is in place, you've measured where these brace bands go, then you know that you're building them all consistently. Where they land, as far as the top of the long truss and the short truss on the hoop, doesn't really matter. Because if your collar ties are built consistently and you get that dimension done consistently, you're in the right spots. So after you have all your braces in, I always put on the bottom of the trusses, we always put this bolt in first, because it's the most difficult one since it shares 2 trusses. Put these 2 bolts in, then on the top we put those bolts in. Once everything's where we want it, we come back and we tighten all the brace band bolts. Those are done with a 1/2 inch impact because it's a 5/16 inch bolt. We come down from the top, that's why the nut is up so that we can tighten it. And we also lift the brace up so that it's centered and inside of the hoop. Since this is a smaller pipe than this, you need to lift it up to make sure that as you tighten this, this ends up in the center of this. So once everything's installed, we've tightened down all of our brace band bolts. We then go back and we add a bunch of self-tapping screws. Every brace band gets a self-tapping screw, both the 2 3/8 brace bands for the top and also the 1 3/8 brace bands for the bottom. We make sure that we've got, again, screws for the seams of our collar tie, as well as 2 screws for where the seams are on our hoop pieces. Now everything's assembled. The last thing we want to do on the ground is we want to mark on the ground where some of the purlins will go when we put the structure up. Doing that in the ground is a lot easier. That way when you're putting up the hoops, you have lines to put all your purlins in place. So right here you can see a black mark that we installed. So what we're doing is we're measuring from the center top of the hoop bottom all the way up here, and at 76 inches we're putting a mark. Basically what we need to make sure is that the roof purlin, which is where this one's going to go, is halfway between the ridge purlin and where the hip board's going to go for support. So we mark both roof purlins. We also mark the ridge purlin, which is the center of the roof hoop piece, and that's what this mark is right here. This particular configuration has a collar tie purlin, so halfway in between the center collar tie piece, we measure the center of that and we put a mark there. Once we have this all together, we pick it up. The easiest way to pick it up is with two people. If you're standing right here, that's a nice place to center the gravity. One person here, one person over there, and two people can easily pick up the hoop. You'll see behind me all these stacks of all the trusses that we've already built, all the hoop tops, getting ready for the buildings that are about to go up.